Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Committee of Adjustment Evening Edition. We're now starting the 3 o'clock agenda. It's now 5 o'clock, and we have 5 items before us. So I have to start off and just statutorily have to read my opening remarks before we start. So good afternoon. During the declared emergency in the City of Toronto, Committee of Adjustment virtual public hearings are being conducted by electronic means through WebEx, an online digital platform, and streamed on the Toronto City Planning YouTube channel. These measures are necessary to comply with physical distancing requirements and a provincial order that limits attendance at public gatherings. This will be a virtual public hearing, and participants who have registered in advance will be able to make their presentations to the committee using WebEx, an online event that is being moderated by city staff. Anyone wishing to view the hearing may do so by watching on YouTube. Participants who have registered in advance will be connecting either by their computer, a phone or tablet app, or by telephone. All participants will automatically be muted on entry. When your item is called, each participant will be unmuted by the moderator, one person at a time. We ask that you mute your devices until you are called on to speak. Land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So in accordance with sections 45 and 53 of the Planning Act 1990 as amended, this meeting of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Toronto is called to order. The Committee of Adjustment considers applications for variances from the provisions of the zoning bylaw that apply to the property, permissions to extend or alter lawful non-conforming uses, and consents to sever properties to create new lots. Anyone who wants to receive a copy of the decision of the committee on an application must submit a written request for a decision by email. Please ensure that you include your name, address, and email address, because Committee of Adjustment and the TLAB, in the event of an appeal, will be sending notifications and appeal updates by email. If you do not agree with the decision of the committee, decisions may be appealed to the Toronto Local Appeal Body, and in some limited circumstances to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. Appeal instructions are set out at the bottom of the decision of the committee. So the hearing procedure, I'll call each item in the order listed in the agenda. First item is unit number 35, and we end at item number 40, so we have a few more applications before us. When you make your submissions where an application is uncontested, the applicant or agent will only proceed with a presentation if the committee requires it. The committee may ask questions or take the matter into the committee for a decision. When an application is contested, and several of them are this afternoon, each speaker, including the applicant agent, is given a maximum of 5 minutes to address the committee. Mr. Palmer is watching Mr. Taylor is watching the clock and will comment when we reach the 5-minute mark. So the applicant, you start off by stating your name and address for the record, and please remember to confine your remarks to the matters outlined in the application. The applicant or agent goes first, makes a presentation to the committee. Please note the committee may not entertain revisions to the proposals at the hearing today. The committee may decide to refer that application if being substantially revised in order to ensure that the revised application is both accurate and that all those entitled to notice of the application are informed of the changes. After the applicant has presented their application, individuals either support or opposed to the application or with concerns will be invited to speak. Committee members may ask questions of each speaker after they finish their presentations. Again, they're given 5-minute maximum to speak. When all speakers have finished, the applicant or agent is given an opportunity to rebut those issues and answer those questions that were raised by the speakers, but not to introduce new information. The matter is then taken into committee for a decision. Okay, does any of the members have any conflicts of interest on the matters before us in the 3 o'clock time slot? Okay, none. Any files to be closed, Madam Secretary, on the items before us?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, we'll find out as we go through. We've had some surprises today, a couple of closed applications. So the first application we'll deal with is item number 35, 264 ALDERCREST Road. It's an application For a second-story addition, there are 5 variances. We have a copy of the site-specific zoning bylaw, and we have no comments from area residents or from city staff. We have one speaker, the agent Joe Dome, registered to speak on this application. Good afternoon, Mr. Dome. You with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so following that introduction, we do have 5 variances. Committee members, do you feel we need a presentation on this? No? Okay, just does anyone have any questions? So what about the balcony? You have a second-story front balcony proposed with an area of 11.53 meters, square meters, whereas 4 meters is permitted. Can you just advise where this, is it off a bedroom? Is it off a common area? What's the purpose of this, this balcony?
Yeah, so for variants 2 and 3 regarding the second floor covered front veranda over the existing ground floor covered veranda. So the situation is that the owner is an older Italian woman who has a daughter with disabilities. And so the intention with this proposal is for her daughter to be able to live on the ground floor for accessibility, and her mother will live on the second floor. But due to her age, she still needs easy access to the outside where she can do her gardening. She can have basil and flowers. And it was determined that this veranda over the existing ground floor veranda was the best choice for her well-being in the years ahead. And there's example, so if we look nearly right across from 264 ALDERCREST, you just jump over to the next street east at 279 A and B Beta Streets. It's a semi-detached. There's 2 large second-story verandas over the front of their covered porches, but they also extend over the full area of their attached garages, and each are of a similar size that we're asking for.
Okay, I'm just looking here, the proposed second floor. So there's going to be, it's a separate living on the second floor. So there's kitchen, dining area, bedroom, laundry, because it's being sort of operated like a duplex.
Yeah, so her intent is to basically to on the second. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Sorry?
No, I'm just wondering, is that how the applicant is considered a single family? I guess there's no issues with that, Madam Secretary Treasurer? It looks like there's a separate apartment on the, I don't know if there's a separate entrance, but there's a separate living space on the second floor, and that's where the new covered concrete porch at the front is. It's actually off, I guess, the living room, whereas the second floor one is usually off a bedroom. But you're saying it's being used for gardening purposes.
That's right.
Okay.
And then for basically just access to the outside, with accessibility issue.
Correct. Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Dome? Okay, are we ready for a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. Mr. Bellissimo here. I find that the balcony is on the street side, and therefore I think is, in comparison to the others, very compatible. I'm glad that the applicant is showing the existing condition as well. We don't get enough of that, so congratulations to you for showing us the existing compared to the proposed. That's really easier for us to understand how this design is developing. So I'd like to move approval of the variances I find them minor in nature.
Thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. Seconder for that motion?
No, sir.
Mr. Taylor, all in favor? Unanimous approval.
Thank you very much.
There's we haven't finished. Is there a friendly amendment? There's a tree issue?
Yeah, I forgot. Forestry condition, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Can I
Paul.
amend my own motion, or do I need someone else to amend it for me?
That's okay, we'll let you do it this time. And Mr.
Okay,
Taylor is
so-
the seconder.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, okay, approved, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dome. Okay, our next
very much.
application is item number 36 on our agenda. It is 81 ELSFIELD Road. It's an application to construct a 2-story rear and south side addition, a second-story addition above the existing dwelling, a new covered porch, and a basement walkout. And there are 3 variances. Community planning is looking for a condition of approval that it be built substantially in accordance with the site plan. There's a forestry condition. And I think we have comments from a couple of neighbors. Yeah, we have 2 letters of opposition from 79 and 83 So the neighbors on either both sides, and we have them present for this as well. So the applicant is Dan Akimovic. I don't know if he's the agent or the owner. Looks like he is the agent. And we have the owner, the residents of 79 and 83 Elsfield present. So let's start with the agent, Mr. Akimovic.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the introduction. I am actually the agent for this property.
Yes.
I've been hired most recently to complete the building permit set of drawings as well as this committee of adjustment application. We're here to actually ask for relief from 3 minor variances as listed in the staff report. First one being the maximum permitted coverage of 3%, and we are asking for 34%. The maximum permitted gross floor area and the floor space index being 0.5, we're hereby asking for 0.68. And then the minimum required side yard, which is on the north side of 1.2, we're asking for 0.78. And that variance has to do with the existing condition or the reuse of the existing wall on that north side. The owner is simply asking to reuse the wall, underpin it to lessen the disturbance to the neighbor to the north, meaning with the excavation and angle of repose and so on. We have reviewed the letters of objections from the...
They're a little unusual. It doesn't seem to have any issues with what you're proposing, but the fact that they're saying that the lot may have archaeological potential.
Correct.
Again, this is an addition. It's not like you're just demolishing and excavating and building new, but haven't really seen this before. Do you know something about this? Is this property of some particular archaeological interest?
Well, I mean, basically, once we saw those letters of objection, it was new to us as well. We did contact the Heritage Department. We did also speak to Nicole Milrose at the COA, and she also clarified that if there were any archaeological issues, if this lot potentially fell under that particular zone, if there were archaeological importance, regarding this site, they would have flagged it and they would have put out a statement for this application. We did not receive that, and for those reasons, we're confident that there are no archaeological issues. In addition, there were some comments about the existing site getting flooded, poor drainage, and so on. And as you know, proposed permit application will include a proposed grading plan that will only be allowed to be built once the city approves the proposed drainage. So we don't really have any sort of issues regarding those letters of objections.
Okay, so I'm going to want to ask staff if I don't know if there's anything. We'll ask the neighbor. They're showing this pink sort of arrow-shaped thing, and it's I don't know where this comes from. But in any way, we'll ask the neighbor about that because they don't seem to have any substantive issues with what you're proposing on planning issues, other than this issue that there's some archaeological significance to this particular lot compared to the whole neighborhood or the whole city or something.
Correct.
So let's hear from the neighbor and the neighbors and see what they know about that, and maybe they can enlighten us.
Mr. Chairman, Julian Lebowski is joining us. Wendy Ann Comer, I don't think she is. Adam tried to reach out, but was unable to. Okay,
they sort of, they've written to us and they sort of piggyback each other's comments.
Right, but Mr. Lebowski is
okay.
present.
So as long as we have one of them, I think that's probably a good thing. Mr. Lebowski, welcome.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm going to make a reference to the comments that I made in the email that I sent. Okay, and in the email it includes the diagram. It shows pink shading, and it is definitely there's some pink shading, and in lot. This, by the way, we had discussions. Our neighbor, Wendy Comer at 83 Elfield Road, that she came up with this based on some issue that she had back in 2016, and she mentioned that to me, and we looked into it, and there is some pink shading on the lot, 81 Elsfield, and also unusually, I think it may be on her lot as well. But so I'm going to read to you what I said here, and that is what I'm saying is based on the attached emails received by my neighbor, Wendy, at 83 Elsfield Road. It would appear that an archaeological assessment may be required of the lot at 81 Elsfield Road. This lot has archaeological potential, according to the information that I looked at, and according to the city's archaeological management plan. It is mandatory, I stated, when there is an archaeological potential to carry out an archaeological assessment before any development can be entertained. And that therefore, until such assessment is done, the variances applied for should be set aside and not approved in its entirety until this is subject to this assessment. I did.
So, sir, can I just interject for a second? How is that of any is that's up to the Heritage Department or the archaeological department? How is that of any concern to you or your neighbor? Why are you raising this? Like, how is this of any of your concern or your neighbor's concern? The city isn't coming. The city isn't telling us anything. I haven't seen anything that supports, that shows that this is an archaeological sensitive site.
Well, what I'm saying is that according to the map, which the Toronto maps, and we've provided you with the link to go in there, and you can see that you would be able to see that area has pink, and therefore has archaeological potential. And according to the regulations, of the city, it's required that it's mandatory, in fact, that an assessment be done, and that's all I'm asking for. If the assessment shows no issue, then you can proceed with your build. But until there's an assessment done, I don't think a build can be actually proceeded with.
Do you work for the city, sir? Do you work for the Heritage Department, sir? Do you work for the Heritage Department? I don't see how this is any of your concern.
No, I don't work for the Heritage Department.
Yeah, there's
I
no
have discussions. I've already mentioned that I based this on discussion with my neighbor, and she provided me with an email with all this information. And I don't work for the Heritage, but I do feel that it's interconnected. It's interconnected with the build. In order for a build to be done, this has to be done. That's my opinion. Okay. You were asking where this came from, and I've given you all the links. It's in the email, and it's fairly straightforward. And you said I think you mentioned that you've looked at this.
No, I didn't look at it. Unless you found some arrowheads in your backyard.
You didn't look at the links or anything at all.
I didn't have the opportunity to open the links, and I haven't heard from the Heritage Department. And I've never heard anything about, and I had a situation in Scarborough I was aware of where they said this property is on a floodplain. It turns out the entire couple of miles around the city center in Scarborough is considered floodplain. So, could you tell me every application in the city maybe should have them investigate whether there's archaeological significance?
No.
I don't have anything authoritarian telling me. It's all
there's a pink
hearsay.
shade, and based on the city map, and it's showing archaeological potential, then you proceed.
Okay. Thank you for advising us of that. But I haven't heard anything from any city departments. I don't have, I don't believe. Anyway, the other members can decide. Does anyone have any questions for the neighbor? Okay. Perhaps the applicant can enlighten us about this if he's heard anything about this or.
No, I mean, just like you, we were surprised by it, and we did
Yeah.
follow up with the Heritage Department to find out if there were any issues. And
did
I
they tell
believe
you?
it was the owner that contacted, and we're told that there was no heritage significance. In fact, he was told that the pink area on that map does not include 81 Ellsfield.
Okay, I don't know what that pink area is, but
Yeah, it's a little tough to read, right?
okay. So does anyone have any further questions for, I guess the other neighbor's not joining us who had sent it to you, I guess, right? So she's not available. So we don't know where that came from, but the city has not, planning department, heritage department has not weighed in on this application or in any that I've been involved with in the last 20 years. So it comes as a bit of surprise to me. Any further questions, or is someone ready to make a motion on this application?
Danny Bellissimo here.
Yes, sir.
Could I ask a question of staff? I'm sorry to belabor this, but when an application goes for a building permit, does that get flagged for archaeological reasons? I'm not aware of it either, so I'm just curious.
For archaeological,
Yes.
I'm not sure, but we do circulate to Heritage.
Yes.
And
Okay.
they have commented in the past, so we do know that they review our applications.
Right.
And when there is an area of cultural significance where they believe there could be something, they do submit a report and recommend conditions for a study or at least a preliminary one to determine if there is potential there before they do a full dig. So in this case, we haven't received anything.
That's good. So that's good. It clarifies that there is circulation to the proper people in the city. So I find that again, like the previous one, I'm glad the architects has included in the elevations the existing condition. I'm glad to see more of those. And I find that the variances are minor in nature and make a motion to approve all the variances as presented before us.
Okay, is there any forestry condition on this one? Probably. There is. Danny, there's a forestry condition. So if that's a friendly amendment for Mr. Palmer.
Okay, Mr. Palmer, thank you very much. I got to do better reading my notes here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's also a planning condition that it be built, I said in the opening, substantially in accordance with the site plan. In the event of approval, they want that done. Tie it to the site plan.
Yes, you're right. I have the note at the top of the item. Sorry, I was at the bottom of the drawing. Yes, there's a planning condition, so that should be amended to include that.
Okay.
Tie it to the site plan.
I'd just like to point out one more thing in terms of just in terms of dismissing this potential heritage issue. We're not talking about a new build here with excavation. We're talking about a simple two-story side and rear south addition, second-story addition, which is no excavation. There's only going to be minimal excavation, correct, Annie, at the rear of the property, and a basement walkout. So it's not like we're completely ripping up and building and putting in a new foundation here. But anyway, I think that was a bit of a...
No, that's good. I understand that. I just wanted to get a clarification from staff. I've never seen, we don't know where all these applications get circulated to, so that's good to know for future reference. Thank you, Barbara.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. We have a seconder for that motion.
I'll second it and just confirm that it's subject to the planning conditions, which is for the site plan, and subject to forestry condition, which was for a private tree permit.
All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, neighbor, and thank you, applicant.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. Okay, we can now move on to item number 37, 15 Neighborhood Lane. And this is an application to construct a multi-level residential building with 3 levels of underground parking. Building B will contain a total of 234 residential units, and there are 7 variances. We have a covering letter. This is to revisions to the site-specific zoning bylaw, reducing the mechanical penthouse. Planning has condition of approval And transportation has no objection. And we have some letters of objection, including Davies Howe is acting on behalf of the owner of 10 and 22 Riverwood, which are small apartment buildings, and we have some concerns from some of the tenants in those buildings as well. Yeah, they're all the three people, other than the Davies Howe, Megan McDermott acting on behalf of the owner of the two properties. We have three tenants of 10 Riverwood Parkway with concerns.
So, Mr. Chairman, Dennis Kutsenko, the first person listed there from 10 Riverwood, apartment 209, will not be joining us today.
Okay.
The other two will, and then Megan McDermott at from Davies Howe will be representing the owner of that particular building.
Yes. Okay, so the first speaker will be the agent Maggie Bassani from.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And members
Good
of the
afternoon.
committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this application. Very quick
Can
background.
you just start off by
property
stating your name and name for the record? I guess you're with Airden Burles, correct?
Yeah, sorry, sir. Maggie Bassani on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, good one. Give us a presentation.
Certainly. The property as the subject of the variance application before you is part of a multi-building development that was approved in 2016 through site-specific zoning bylaw amendments with the support of city staff. For context, there are 4 buildings in the project, and this application before you only applies to Building B, which is at the northwest quadrant of the site. The application is to increase the height of this building from 8 stories to 10 stories for that east-west portion, and from 6 stories to 8 stories for the north-south portion. Building B is an L-shaped building, and as acknowledged, actually just for clarification, in the staff report from planning, that the purpose of the application indicated in the hearing notices is a bit incorrect, because it's actually through the site-specific zoning approval, a building has already been approved for this site, and now we are asking for variances to that approval. The application is triggered by a desire to provide a broader range of unit types, and specifically to allow the owner to incorporate family-sized units in the project. The variances will facilitate an increase or a provision of 3-bedroom units, equivalent to 10% of the total unit count in the building. And we're pleased to advise that we've been working very closely with staff in getting their support for this application, as well as working with the counselor's office. And I note that you have on your file a detailed planning rationale provided by the owner's land use planner in support of the application, explaining how the variances satisfy the 4-part test. Getting to the variances themselves, I put them into 2 main categories. 1 dealing with the actual height and density request, and 2 more technical variances. In the first category, variances 4 and 5 would allow us to revise the building envelope diagrams in the site-specific zoning bylaws to allow for additional height, specifically an additional 4.2 meters for the east-west leg and 4.55 for the north-south portion. The footprint of the building remains the same as it was previously approved, and so we are maintaining the same generous setback distance from the streets and lot lines. From a built form perspective, the original zoning contemplated that the greatest heights would be located at the northwest corner of the site, and it would transition down towards the low-rise residential uses to the southeast, which is the kitty corner of our site at the intersection of Berry and Stephen Drive. The proposed increase from 8 to 10 stories for that east-west portion continues to reflect the approved 10-story building immediately to the west, which is Building C as part of the multi-unit development. So a 10-story building has already been approved on the larger property. And then it steps down to that 8-story north-south portion. And it's also important to note that this 8-story portion further steps down to a 6-story street wall along Stephen Drive to mirror the same 6-story street wall condition for the building to the south at Building A. The 2-story addition on the east-west portion is stepped back 10.2 meters from the building face along Stephen Drive. So there is still a generous step back, and all these built form elements reinforce that transition in height down towards the street edges, as well as that main intersection of Stephen and Barry Road. The proposal continues to maintain a comfortable pedestrian scale along that Stephen Road frontage, as well as remains compatible with the surrounding properties in terms of height and massing. With respect to shadows, we did conduct a shadow study, and the latest one you have before you is dated September 16th. And the shadows, I would note that the shadows shown in the study were further improved or mitigated because we decreased the height of the mechanical penthouse by an additional 1 meter in response to discussions that we had with planning staff. And this reduction in height of the mechanical penthouse is reflected in the architectural plans filed on October 16th. So based on the shadow study, there are no additional shadows on lands designated neighborhoods or as well as the on-site open space. There is a minor incremental on the buildings to the north, which are in the apartment neighborhood designation. But I put to the committee that this incremental shadow is very similar to the approved condition as part of the site-specific zoning. The adjacent buildings will continue to have adequate access to sunlight. And two important notes on that shadow study. The subject property sits significantly lower relative to the properties to the north and the west. To the immediate north, the property is actually 2 meters lower in grade. And then there are also mature trees with lots of foliage lining the entire length of that north lot line of our property. Both of these considerations were not incorporated in the shadow model. So the shadows that you do see, which shows the incremental shadow beyond the as-of-right shadows, they are further mitigated by these two factors.
So if I could just interrupt for a second. So in terms of, we just know the only objectors here are the tenants and owner of 10 Riverwood Parkway. Whether there's an incremental shadow on that particular property, well, the tenants who are objecting appear to live on the second and first floors, so they would already, I assume, like, we're going to, obviously, the agent at Davies Howe is going to know they're only talking not about the whole project, but just about this incremental change. So is there any increase in shadowing on the 10 Riverwood, or, and for that matter, 22 Riverwood? Because
there is that yeah, so there is a very minor incremental shadow, but and that's why I pointed out to you that the shadow study you have in front of you is not truly reflective of the actual condition because it wasn't modeled to reflect the significant 2-meter grade change, because that property, the property to the north, sits 2 meters higher. And then there are trees, mature trees that line the entire north property line adjacent to those southern facades of those buildings. And those trees are about 4 stories high, and I actually did go to the site today, and they're right against those buildings. So they are already actually, I think, subject to quite a bit of shadow, not just from the as-of-right approved condition on my client's site, as well as just the tree condition exactly. As well.
Okay. How many stories is the 10 and 22? I see the tenants are on the first and second floors, but how many story building is that? Are those buildings? We'll hear it from the...
Yes, I believe that 10 Riverwood is a 4-story apartment.
Okay. Right.
And 22 is, I believe, also 4 stories.
So your building B is already higher?
It's already higher, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Bassani before we hear from the neighbors?
May I clarify? There's some clerical things I wanted to point out that the Secretary of Charter suggests I point out to the committee today. Do want to point out that variance 2 in the notice in reference to floor space index missed the word index. So that was a clerical error that I was advised to bring to your attention. Okay, and similarly for variance 6, which is a technical variance to allow for height projections as commonly found in zoning bylaw amendments, that the reference should not be to section 4D, but rather 5C2, and that the reference to diagram 3 should be revised diagram 3. But I just wanted to point that out to you for your benefit, as I was advised to do
Okay,
so.
so Madam Secretary Treasurer, those two things we can revise?
Yes, they were properly translated from the waiver, but the applicant has determined that they made a mistake, so we can amend that.
Okay. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add, or we should go to the neighbors and you'll have a chance to respond?
If you have any questions about the other variances, I'm also happy to walk through them too. What I just walked through mainly dealt with variances 4 and 5.
Right. And I guess it's pretty explanatory. It tells you what the general is. It tells you what your site-specific zoning bylaw is, and then they show what the incremental coverage. You're looking for an extra 1% of lot coverage, slightly higher
Just
maximum.
to clarify, to clarify on the lot coverage, that it actually is a technical variance because the design and the footprint of the building has not changed as originally approved back in 2016. We discovered there's a calculation error.
Okay.
And so that's why we had to go in now for the variance out of an abundance of caution.
Okay. So we'll go on to the neighbors, and just to clarify for the neighbors to realize, and especially the tenants, as opposed to Ms. McDermott, who would be aware that we're only talking here with the incremental changes. We're not going back to first principles complaining about this property. It's already been approved by site-specific zoning bylaw. So all we're looking at today is the 7 variances, and you can easily see what the changes are and whether those changes are considered to be minor or not. Okay, so let's hear first, I guess, from Mikola Harashmanchuk at apartment 102 at 10 Riverwood Parkway. Welcome.
Yes, I am here. Sorry, I don't speak in English very well. My wife will help me, okay?
Okay.
Can I help my husband? Sorry.
Of course. We just want to know what your concerns are with this, with the changes that they're proposing.
We are concerned about shadow because it's increased shadow during the morning time.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? We need your name for the record, okay?
It's not. My name is Nadia Harasimchuk. I am tenant.
No, that's fine. We just needed your name.
Okay.
Okay.
So again, we're talking only about the incremental change here, not because this project was already approved several years ago, right? In 2016. Yeah. So all we're talking, there's a site-specific bylaw. So we're talking about the incremental change, the 1% more coverage, the the small, just the changes. So how do those changes? You're on the ground floor. We heard there's big trees. So how does this change? How does this affect you? What they're adding, the extra little small?
I'm very. I'm concerned about additional shadow during the morning time, and also about noisy, because the additional shadow increase construction time, and it likely lead to increased delay and prolonged development. And also, I'm worried about additional 2-story because it will be about the tree foliage, and it will allow to individual from the new building looking down inside into 10 Riverwood building.
Okay, so you're worried about overlook from these additional 2 floors. And in terms of extra noise for construction, or it's going to take longer to build the building because it's 2 floors more, that is not construction noise is something that we don't deal with. If you have problems with construction, you can call the building department, but we don't. Obviously, every time they build a new building or build a new house, there's noise and construction and debris and construction activities that start early in the morning, but that's not something that people can come and complain about, and certainly that it's already being built, it's only 2 more floors. So that's not something we can take into consideration, but you're saying there's additional overlook and additional shadowing by this incremental amount. Okay, so does anyone have any questions for Nadia? No? Okay, so let's go on and let's hear from Justin Costin, who's I guess he lives right above you in apartment 202.
Mr. Chairman, I just had Mr. Costin on the line like maybe 5 seconds ago, and he dropped off.
Okay, we'll see if he comes back. We'll go to Megan McDermott.
Yeah.
And Again, his concerns being the second floor tenant as opposed to the ground floor tenant. Megan McDermott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Megan McDermott. I am counsel to Riverwood Holdings, Inc. My client is the owner of 10 and 22 Riverwood Parkway, which are two apartment buildings immediately adjacent to the north of the subject site. And just to make things clear for you, my letter might not have been entirely clear on this, and I do apologize for that. 10 Riverwood Parkway is at the corner of Riverwood Parkway and Stephen Drive. It's occupied by an apartment building with 3 stories at grade in the front and 4 stories at the rear. Immediately to the west of that is 16 Riverwood Parkway, and this property is not owned by my client. It is occupied by a 5-story apartment building.
Yep. And
then the next building to the west is 22 Riverwood Parkway. That's the other property owned by my client, and it's occupied by a 3-story walk-up. And so these 3 buildings share a northern border with the subject site and will be the most affected by the proposed application. The rest of the surrounding area is characterized predominantly by 3- and 4-story walk-up apartment buildings. So my client is opposed to this application because of the impact that the increased height will have on its tenants and its ability to keep current tenants and attract new ones. A number of residents of my client's building have submitted letters in opposition. There are 2 or potentially only 1 here tonight. In addition, my client has already had a number of tenants on the south side of its 2 buildings terminate their leases, citing this development as a reason.
He would be next.
My client did participate in the rezoning process in 2016 in opposition. And while not happy with the resulting zoning bylaws that were passed, it took some amount of comfort in the fact that the tallest building on the site, the 10-story building, would be in the northwest corner of the site, and then there would be a transition through a stepping down of height to the 8 stories for building B. Now the applicant's coming back, proposing to get rid of that transition entirely and have a full 10-story wall of buildings across the northern boundary of the subject site directly behind my client's buildings. So
how does
dealing with the 4...
So again, you're concerned with their tenants' enjoyment of the property and an ability to retain and keep tenants and get new tenants from going 8 to 10 stories when you're 3 to 4, or is it they have some other reasons other than just preserving the rights of their tenants on ground floor, up to 4 stories, being impacted by an 8-story building as opposed to a 10-story building? And then again, I'll ask you the same question if you can incorporate whether you've reviewed the sun and shadow studies that the applicant has provided, is whether the incremental, what the incremental effect is on your tenants' properties, your clients' properties, if any.
Yes, certainly, sir. So looking at the sun shadow studies that were submitted by the applicant, you can see that there is increased shadow, the incremental shadow from the additional height on the building to the north. And in my client's view, this is not minimal. So it does show that there is additional shadowing on the south and east facades of 16 and 22 Riverwood Parkway in the morning hours from 9 to 11. And there's additional shadowing on the west and south of 10 Riverwood Parkway in the afternoon hours from 12 to 4. And my client is particularly concerned about this increased shadowing given this new COVID-19 world that we're living in, because people are staying at home, they're working from home during the daytime hours, and these are the exact hours that we're seeing this additional shadowing is the greatest effect from the proposed development. And so, sir, shadowing is one of the main concerns. Additional concerns are adequate privacy, sky views, and if you look at the policies in the city's official plan, specifically 3.12, the built form policies, and 4.2, the apartment neighborhood policies, the key themes in these policies are really, you're supposed to be locating, massing, designing buildings to be compatible with adjacent buildings. They want to have transition in scale to lower scale buildings, provision for adequate light and privacy, minimizing visual bulk and loss of sky view, and create minimal shadowing. And in my client's view, the increase in height here does not meet the intent and purpose of these policies. You've completely eliminated that transition in height that you had going across the rear of the property. It's now a 10-story wall of buildings backing onto these 3- and 5-story buildings, and the associated impacts with reduced privacy, access to sunlight, and sky views. In addition, the zoning bylaws that were passed in 2016, they clearly reflected this stepping down of heights. And if you read the staff report from that application, which council would have relied on in approving the development, it specifically refers to having that stepping down of heights across the property.
Yeah, Ms. McDermott, can you
So
try to wrap up, please? Because you're over 5 minutes. Thanks.
Yeah. Absolutely, sir. So the final thing that I wanted to say on the test of the desirable and appropriate, when the overall development was approved in 2016, it was done on the basis that it would provide space for a co-op grocery store for the community that would be ready for occupancy before any occupancy of residential units on the site. The first building has now been completed, but the grocery store is not. And we're seeing now that the city is requesting a condition that there be an additional $99,700 in connection with this proposal to be used for the interior building of that co-op space. So in my client's view, it is not desirable or appropriate to be granting additional density when the grocery store has not been completed as required, and to grant that additional density in consideration for more money to complete something that was already supposed to have been completed by now.
Okay.
So just in conclusion, my client requests that the committee refuse the application.
Okay, so
Thank
you're
you.
concerned with the stepping down. It should have been stepped. I guess you wouldn't be happy if they made the 10-story 12 stories, and then you'd have the stepping down to 10. The issue is, I guess, from 2016, you see often in the city and even in the high-rise buildings of 5 years is long, from 2016 is a long time ago. And again, the other flip side rationale is it provides more affordable housing to have another 2 floors 5 years following 2016. So I assume, I just want to, again, there's a bit of a discrepancy because Ms. Bassani is saying there is no significant effect on shadowing on your client's buildings by these additional two floors pursuant to their study, and you're saying there is. So perhaps we can ask her about that in rebuttal to revisit that, and perhaps that's something we have to consider. So thank you for that. Anyone have any questions for Ms. McDermott on behalf of the owners of the 2 apartment buildings? 10 and 22, not 16. I take it 16 would have notice, but they're not here. Okay, so if there's no questions for Ms. McDermott, let's go back to the agent to respond to the concerns of both the tenant on the first floor of 10 Riverwood Parkway and on behalf of the ownership of 10 and 22 to respond to those issues that have been raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to the resident in Unit 102, I believe, of 10 Riverwood, they are located on the ground floor unit, and as I think you pointed out, sir, there is an existing building already approved on the Building B site. So respectfully, I don't think that there's any incremental shadow impact on that unit. With respect to noises, as you also pointed out, it is not within the purview of the committee to address. There are noise bylaws to deal with these concerns. With respect to privacy, I have a similar response that there is already an existing approved building on the property that is taller ultimately than the neighboring property to the north. So there is no additional incremental impact with respect to privacy in that regard, and that we are still maintaining very generous separation distances from the Building B as to the property to the north. That is not changing. There is actually a total separation distance of 15 meters, which is well beyond the typical window-to-window facing condition. With respect to Ms. McDermott's comment on the transition, the original intent of the zoning was not to provide transition to the north. That was never the intent of the site-specific zoning, and there's nothing in the original 2016 staff report to suggest that the transition is to go northerly. The intent of the transition was towards the street frontages and towards the intersection of Stephen and Berry Road, which we are maintaining. And as I pointed out, the 10-story east-west leg of the building does further step down to an 8-story component, as then a 6-story street wall. So there is a transition contrary to Ms. McDermott's submissions. With respect to the shadows as well, as I point out in my previous submissions, the shadow studies that you have before you are not reflective of the true shadow impact. In fact, they are significantly diminished from what you actually see there in purple. Yes, I acknowledge that this shadow study shows some impact, but it is actually diminished because of the grading, the significant grade change, which is 2 meters, as well as the heavily lined lot line, the shared lot line, which already creates significant shadow on those southerly facades. With respect to reference to the built form policies and the apartment neighborhood policies in the official plan, the test under section 3.1.2 of the official plan with respect to shadows is to adequately limit. The official plan policy does not impose a test of no new shadow. It's adequately limited shadow, and respectfully, given all the site-specific conditions with the grading, the trees, the stepping and the transition, I would submit to members of the committee that there is an appropriate limiting of shadow impact if there is any impact at all, because again, with the generous step back, separation distances, change in grade, trees, any impact is appropriately and sufficiently mitigated. So in respect to the grocery store, I do want to respond to this because Ms. McDermott suggests that it's inappropriate to approve this application simply because the grocery store has not opened. I put to you that in the original site-specific zoning bylaw, the obligation as part of the Section 37 contributions, being those community benefits provided by the owner, was to provide leased premises for that food co-op, and which our client has done. But it wasn't incumbent on our client to make sure that they can open and have all the funds, an outfit and stocking employees. That's not the responsibility of my client, respectfully. And in fact, as you see in the condition in the staff report, as part of the approval of this variance application, our client would be committing to providing additional funds to help the food store open, which clearly would benefit not just the food co-op, but the greater surrounding community as well. So in a very brief conclusion, the application maintains the intent and purpose of the official plan. It's desirable. The impacts, if any, are minor, and it really is collectively and individually meeting the 4 tests, and will continue to provide a fantastic range of building unit types and facilitate families living in this neighborhood with the larger unit sizes.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any questions for the agent or for any of the neighbors for that matter? Or are we ready for a motion?
I have a few questions of the applicant. I don't know if you heard me speak previously about the small houses where they showed in clear illustration the existing and the proposed. And I have to register a great disappointment in a big firm like yours not coming forth to us to show us the difference in shadowing of your elevations or a 3D model to show the difference between the 2 floors and where they're located. There's a lot of talk and it's very hard to follow everything you're saying. So register great disappointment. You have axonometrics and you have all kinds of methods of doing that. And to me, that's an oversight. And hopefully next time when you do come back to the committee, you will show us those differences.
Sorry, Mr. I can't understand what you're saying. Are you saying that they don't show us the before and after shadow studies? Again,
not the shadows. What I'm trying to illustrate that they have an existing proposal that went through a huge process through planning and community input. And then they're coming back to us for 2 more floors. And the applicant has been trying to explain those 2 floors, and I was hoping there would have been a simple drawing to show those 2 extra floors in reference to the other 3D modeling of the buildings. That's all I'm saying. So it's great disappointment in a great firm like yours to exclude that presentation. In terms of shadowing, I understand anything taller, the shadow goes farther. So it may not impact those particular people who are here today, but it definitely impacts people beyond that. We all know the taller a building is or an object is, the shadow farther it goes. And my third point is,
No, Mr. Melissa, are you asking her any questions? Are you asking questions? You're just pontificating and telling her why you're disappointed in what they haven't given us. Can we make a decision on what we have? I want a question, not just commentary.
Michael, you've been pontificating for the last half hour too.
Okay.
And my question is, why were you coming here instead of going back to planning, and why was this not dealt with originally in the original plan? And in terms of the bigger units, could they not also go into the existing reconfiguration of the existing floors that were designed? So I'd like to know why the existing larger family units could not have been incorporated in the existing approval.
Thank you, members, for that question. With respect to your question about the, just to step back a moment, about your shadow study, questions about or comments about the shadow study, the area shown in purple is the incremental beyond the as of right approved in the zoning. And I would suggest that it's important to look at where those shadows land, not simply that there is additional purple shown, but where they land, because that is ultimately indicative of whether telling us what the impact is, if any. So for example, if the purple is landing on the roof of a building, I would submit to you that there is no impact to the enjoyment of that property or the tenants of that property. So it's important, I think, to look at where that shadow lands, and not just the magnitude, but the location as well. With respect to the larger unit sizes, I think the simple answer, it was not contemplated as part of the original plan in 2016. The market conditions have changed, and it makes sense to incorporate larger units. And I think it also supports the official plan and as well provincial policies to provide larger family size units, which is a big part of what the City of Toronto has been pushing for owners and developers to provide these larger units.
Thank you.
Any further questions for either the applicant or the neighbors, or are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chair, I find this application to be an excellent example of responsiveness to changing economy and socioeconomic realities that are much different now than they were 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I find the variances to be minor in nature, and that they respect the other 3 tests under the Planning Act as well. So as a result, I move approval of the variances subject to the Planning Department conditions, which I'm hopeful that the agent is aware of. I'll ask that as a question.
Yes, sir.
You are? And as well, I believe there's a condition required by or requested by Urban Forestry.
Sorry.
Urban Forestry with respect to private trees.
No, Urban Forestry had originally submitted a deferral request. Once the deadline to submit comments had passed, they did submit a new comment saying that their issues have been resolved and they no longer require a deferral or any conditions.
Okay, then my motion would be only conditional then on the planning conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. We have a second for Mr. Taylor's motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, and I just want to point out in terms of, I guess from 2016, almost every building, condo building or apartment building, if they got approval in 2016 and they were fortunate or unfortunate not to build it yet, they are coming back for additional density, and that's a good thing for the city. It provides more housing. Again, in this case, a greater unit type, which maybe wasn't contemplated back then, and it's a win-win. And I believe that the impact on 3-, 4-, 5-story buildings adjacent are quite minimal in terms of the overall benefit to doing this. So I'm in support of this as well. So all in favor? Opposed? Is that unanimous? There you go, yep. Okay, you have unanimous approval. Thank you, and thank you, neighbors. Okay, we have 3 more applications. Next one is item number 38, 70 DIXFIELD Drive.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we have Janice Robinson here as agent. Just let me do a quick introduction of what we have here so we can remember what we were dealing with. This 38. All right, this is an application to construct a 3-story apartment building that will contain a total of 42 units. There are 3 variances, and you are the only speaker registered. Ms. Robinson?
Yes, do you want me to make a presentation?
Committee members, do you feel you need a presentation on this? We have a site-specific zoning bylaw. We have the other bylaw. We have a cover letter, and we have a letter of opposition. We have no one registered to speak.
Okay. These variances, the variances being requested will facilitate construction of 42 rental units in the rear of the property. The property was rezoned for this purpose by zoning bylaws enacted in June 2018. The site plan application is being processed, and it is at the stage where all of the city departments, including planning, engineering, and forestry, are satisfied. The variances were triggered when 3 buildings were joined into 1 building. There's a side-by-side comparison that is in your package. It shows that where there were 3 buildings, they're now in 1 building. And that's the explanation for variances 1 and 3. So the map schedule to the zoning bylaw shows 3 buildings, and there's no side yard between those 3 buildings. The reason why the buildings were joined into 1 was to avoid having to construct separate engineering service connections to each building. So that was very expensive to do. And with just 1 building, there can be 1 service connection. The other variance regarding amenity space was also triggered when the buildings were joined into 1, because 1 building exceeds 20 units, whereas when the original bylaw was done, there were 3 buildings that were all less than 20 units. The provision of indoor and outdoor amenity space on this property was determined in the rezoning process. There will be some indoor amenity space in the other apartment building to be constructed on the site. And there's indoor amenity space in the existing apartment building on the site. So there is 1 letter of objection from a neighbor. I see that they're not here today, referencing the location of the building. The building is located exactly where the zoning bylaw requires it to be, which was decided by council after a 2-year process. There's no change to the setbacks or the height of the building. The only difference is there isn't going to be those little side yards in between, and it's going to be 1 building instead of 3. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, please answer them.
Anyone have any questions for Mrs. Robinson?
Ms. Robinson, where is the amenity area located?
So there's no amenity area in this building. There was never any planned in the rezoning. There are indoor amenity rooms in the existing apartment building on the site, and there will be indoor amenity rooms on the other building that's planned on the site. And so there was a total of, there was another building next to the West Mall that's also zoned on the property. And there's outdoor amenity space behind the property and around the property. So all of that was decided when the property was rezoned in 2018.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone have any further questions for Ms. Robinson, or are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chair, I find the variances to be in keeping with the 4 tests under the Planning Act. And I recommend approval unconditionally.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Seconder for Mr. Taylor's motion. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Item number 39. 77 38th Street. It's an application for 2-story rear addition. There are 2 variances. We have the Long Branch character guidelines and what do we have here? We have a letter of concern from, where's the letter of concern from? They point out that just 6838th Street, they point out as staff that there's a address mentioned depicted on the west side of the street on the odd numbers, on the plan, odd numbers are on the east side in Toronto, even numbers on the west side. Please revise. Does anyone understand that? And we have as speakers on this application, John Boone, the agent, I think he was with us this morning as well, seems like a long time ago, and Paul Nakamura at 70. He looks like he's the owner. So we just have the agent and the owner on this application. And if someone can understand what the neighbor at 68 is pointing out to us, I'm not quite sure. The street name is incorrect or something? I don't know what this is about. In any event, Mr. Boone?
The issue with the street name is the H was forgotten.
Oh,
so it's not
okay.
38th Street, it's 38th.
Oh, okay. So it's a grammar issue. Mr. Boone, welcome back.
Yes, thank you.
Pretty straightforward application here. I guess Mr. Nakamura is your client. He's not a neighbor in opposition, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So perhaps we can just see if committee members have any questions about these 2 variances that are here on this 2-story addition. And if not, if they're ready to make a motion. You've got the eaves and you have the floor space index variance. Any questions for Mr. Boone?
If the other members don't have any questions, I'll be ready for a motion.
Okay.
I find that the variances are minor in nature and move that they be approved by the committee.
Any urban forestry? No. Okay, there's no
I don't think
questions.
there's difference.
Thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. Seconder for Mr. Bellissimo's motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. All in favor? Unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Boone and Mr. Nakamura.
Thank you. Have a great night.
And our last application of the evening is item number 40, 306 Rexdale Boulevard. And this is an application for a medical office rehab facility, which is not permitted in this zone. And we have a cover letter, we have a detailed description of the use, and interesting, it's not permitted in an E1 zone, but they pointed out that their current location is also in an E1 zone. Transportation has no objection. And this is for a rehab program in a community setting. Rocco Forgione, I guess, is the owner of the building and is presenting this application, I guess, on behalf of this proposed tenant who needs permission in order to rent space there. Mr. Forgione?
Yes, here.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
You have the honor of being our last application of the day.
Almost there, yes. Thank you.
What we have here is a medical office is not permitted in E zone. You're currently in, or your proposed tenant is currently in that zone. We have copy of the interior floor plans, the cover letter. I take it this is just a typical industrial building?
It is, yes.
They wish to operate a medical clinic in there. You as landlord, you're happy with that?
Yes, we're generally happy.
Okay, was there a condition on this? No, okay, I was thinking that was good, because sometimes they ask for a time limited, and that's not a good thing, because you have to spend the money to do the, internal leaseholds. So there is no time limit, and it's just permission to have a medical clinic, which is a rehab facility in this E zone. Any questions, or is someone ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion to wrap it up.
Okay.
I find that the building, because of all the parking around it, would not impact negatively on the other neighbors' property uses. I find that the variances are minor in nature, and make a motion to approve the variances.
Okay, thank you. Seconder for that motion? Okay. Everyone at once?
Give it to Neil.
Okay, Mr. Palmer, all in favor? You have unanimous approval. Mr. Forgione, you have approval.
Thank you. Have yourselves a great evening.
You too.
All done.
You too.
What's left of it.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Meeting's adjourned
Back
at
to
6:10.
CNN.
Thank you.
So cold. Adam, can you end the stream?